Do you have an RSP and you wonder what would happen if you outlived your RSP? Well, that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to use your RSP in estate planning. Let's get going. So, first of all, what is an RSP? An RSP, as the name suggests, is a registered retirement savings plan. It's a retirement savings plan and it's registered with the Canadian government because it's afforded certain tax benefits. So, what are those tax benefits? First of all, if you make contributions to an RSP, they are tax deductible. And while the money stays in that account, it grows tax free and essentially tax deferred because it grows tax free until you have a withdrawal. Now let's talk about estate planning. What is estate planning? A lot of people might say, "Well, I have a will, so I have an estate plan." Not necessarily, but it is a good start and it's a foundation for estate plan. An estate plan involves organizing and planning for the distribution of your assets upon your death or incapacitation. And essentially, what it does is it ensures that your wishes are carried out to minimize taxes and helps avoid legal complications for your heirs. And essentially, estate planning often includes, like we mentioned, a will, but it's much more than that, right? So, you have a will. It also includes naming your beneficiaries, setting up trust, planning for taxes, probate, charitable contributions, things of that nature. Now, let's talk about naming the beneficiaries because that's going to be an important part of what we talk about today. So, if you have an RSP, you might say, well, should I name a beneficiary? Well, I think it's an integral part of the estate planning process. And it's something that you should consider even if you're young now with an RSP, because you just never know what may happen. Without naming a beneficiary, your RSP becomes part of your estate and potentially subjecting it to probate taxes, meaning the amount that's in the estate will have to go through the probate process and you will pay taxes on that. But even before that, there is a disposition. So here in Canada, once you die, it's as if you sold everything and there's a disposition. As it relates to RSPs, it's almost as if in the year that you die, that you earned all that money. So for example, if you had, let's use a round number, $1 million in RSP, and it's $1 million and you pass away. Here in Ontario, the taxes is going to look like 53.53%, somewhere around there. So essentially, more than half would go directly, would at some point go directly to CRA, unless you have things that could offset that, but not including or notwithstanding anything else. If you die, it's as if you earn that money in that particular year that you die. So failing to name a qualified beneficiary could result in the RSP's value, the RSP value being taxed on your final income tax return. So you got to think about that. There's a disposition and you're taxed then, and then you know you also have to consider the probate aspect of it because if you have a certain amount in probate, then you will have to pay that amount, right? So let's talk about who you could choose as a beneficiary. Now, the logical situation for most couples is going to be naming your spouse. So if you name your spouse and you consider naming your spouse, what happens there? Well, this actually helps to avoid taxes on your final return, and it can also save for the probate process. Why? Because your spouse must transfer the assets to their RSP by the end of the year for the year following your death. However, here's a beautiful thing: that money gets tax deferred and it gets rolled over. So, which is a good reason for you to consider your spouse because having your partner as a beneficiary means that amount gets tax deferred. Now, again, your spouse must transfer the assets to their RSP by the end of the year following your death, right? What are some other options? Naming your child or your grandchild. Now, this is not as popular, but there may be instances where you want to do that, or you may have no surviving spouse. Well, if you left it to your child or grandchild, the plan's value is taxed on your final income return, right? So still got to deal with taxes. However, if they're financially dependent, the tax can be transferred to their return. Well, what does that look like? Well, the minor dependents can use the assets to purchase an annuity paying until age 18. And at that and while that's happening, by the way, it's going to be taxed as income. Specifically, where the minor or the grandchild purchases a term certain annuity and it cannot pass age 18, maximum term to age 18, only the annuity payments will be taxed as they're received in the minor's hands. So it's a little bit different there, obviously, than if you transfer it to your spouse. What about transferring it to a child or grandchild um, with a physical or mental incapacity? Well, assets can also be transferred to an RSP, a RIF, an RDSP, or a life annuity if the dependent has physical or mental incapacity. So these are, again, these are options that a lot of times individuals have not contemplated. No, you may say, well, I don't want to leave it to any of those folks. What if I just leave it to my estate? Sure, you can do that. Again, it's going to be fully taxable, right? If you have some non-capital losses or charitable donations or things of that nature, it can offset a bit of that. But it will be fully taxable on that, treated as ordinary income. However, here's the thing: naming your estate could also increase probate taxes. We talked about that, the probate aspect of it, going through the probate, potential additional taxes there. But you could also expose the estate to creditor claims as the will becomes public. So if people start to recognize that, okay, you passed away and yeah, other creditor claims that they have against you, or they may just have a general claims that they want to bring against you, then this now becomes part of that essentially pot, right? So you have all these assets going through probate, and what will happen is that they will then say, I want piece of this, piece of that estate because this person owed me this, or maybe they have, sometimes people may even make up claims. We live in a litigious society; it's becoming more litigious. So these are things you have to consider if you're going to name your estate. Now, you may have, good reasons for, leaving your RSP to your estate, but just know that that is what's at stake there. Hopefully, this was helpful. I'll see you next week where we talk about something similar, usually having to do with retirement or estate planning. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Like, share, subscribe.